One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natwar Singh. Part 17. The Indo-China boundary conflict arose primarily because the two concepts, that is, the Chinese one of strategic borders and India's of historic borders, could not be reconciled. While the Chinese were prepared to use diplomatic and, if necessary, military methods in pursuit of their concept, the Indian approach from 1950 was primarily declaratory and ineffectively military. Pandit Nehru, the idealist, did not really gauge the hard headed pragmatism of Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, and other Chinese leaders and how it affected China's policies vis a vis the border and India from the time when the Chinese army occupied Tibet in 1951. Pandit Nehru consistently maintained that India should revive the ancient cultural ties it shared with China and keep them alive. He, as well as his officials, all but ignored the rapid building of infrastructure in Tibet leading up to the border with India and the regular reprinting of maps by China, which showed large parts of India as its own. In October 1954, the Prime Minister visited China and was welcomed in Peking by a million people lined up on both sides of the road as Pandit Nehru and Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai drove by in an open car. Pandit Nehru genuinely thought that it was a spontaneous and popular welcome. The fact is that it was organized spontaneity. If the Chinese government had so decided, not a single person would have been on the roads. On his return, Pandit Nehru stopped in Calcutta. The first letter he wrote on his China experience was to Edwina Mountbatten and shared with her the content of his discussions with the Chinese leaders. Strictly speaking, this was against the oath of secrecy he had taken. At the time, of course, no one knew of this letter and only came to light later when his selected works, edited by S. Gopal, were published. The roots of Indo Soviet cooperation go back to the 1920s. As early as 1923, Lenin was conscious of Mahatma Gandhi and India's struggle for independence. Nehru had visited the Soviet Union in 1927 for the 10th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. In 1928, he published his first book, Soviet Russia. Throughout the 1930s, he made favorable comments on the Soviet Union and Soviet policies under Stalin. This he did in good faith, ignoring the bloody purges of thousands of party leaders and generals between 1937-1938. The Soviet Union did not reciprocate. By this time, the Cold War had already started. The world was divided into two camps. Nehru struck to non alignment. Stalin's Soviet Russia refused to accept that Nehru was the leader of an independent and sovereign country. Not only that, the Russians continued to assert that India was politically and economically a lackey of Western imperialists and looked upon India's membership of the Commonwealth with disdain. Stalin also lent active support to the Communist Party of India, which was leading a liberation struggle in Hyderabad. It was only after Lord Mountbatten's departure that Sardar Patel ended the rebellion in Hyderabad and the Nizam acceded to India. It was only after Stalin's death that a slight change in Soviet policy towards India became discernible. The Soviets had appreciated India not signing the peace treaty on Japan as well as its attitude during the Korean War. The Soviets also began to look at Nehru's non alignment policy with an open mind. Nehru's visit to the Soviet Union in 1955 was a landmark moment in the histories of the two countries. He received a very friendly and enthusiastic welcome not only from the government but also from the people of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union consistently helped us in the Security Council on Kashmir, where the US led Western countries supported Pakistan, as also on our liberation of Goa. In April 1955, the Prime Minister attended Bandung Conference. Pandit Nehru had succeeded in getting China invited against the wishes of some of the pro-Western countries, many of which did not recognize the People's Republic of China. In all good faith, Pandit Nehru took Zhou Enlai under his wing and introduced him to a large number of leaders. Zhou later exploited in full measure these connections he had made. Instead of being grateful to Nehru, Zhou Enlai thought he was patronizing him. In 1959, the Dalai Lama, as well as the large entourage accompanying him, crossed the Chinese border with India and sought refuge. The immediate and the most serious fallout of India playing host to the greatest Buddhist in the world was that Sino-India relations, already strained, began to fall apart. Throughout 1959, Peking kept the heat on Pandit Nehru, provoking numerous incidents on the border. Pandit Nehru, for the first time during his tenure, faced pointed criticism within the Lok Sabha, even from members of Congress, for what they called his inept handling of the situation. The press, too, was unforgiving. The fears, both within the parliament and on the streets, was not unfounded, and the enormity of the bilateral feud became clear when the Chinese ambassador to India, Pao Se-he, called on the foreign secretary S. Dutt. I was asked to attend the meeting and to take notes. But the need did not arise. Ambassador Pau handed a sealed envelope to S. Dutt and left. It was a deliberate act of gross diplomatic discourtesy. As Chinese military activity on the border increased with disquieting speed, Pandit Nehru's response did not satisfy Parliament. This was a wholly new experience for him, for his authority had never been challenged. Among the officials, too, unease was discernible. Some of us junior officials argued heatedly about the faith the Prime Minister had placed in Chou En Lai. Nevertheless, his statement in the Rajya Sabha, which was widely reported, was disquieting. He confessed that he had foolishly not kept Parliament informed of the developments and made an irresponsible statement that not a blade of grass grew in Aksai Chin. In October 1962, China launched a full fledged war and we were comprehensively defeated. Our army was ill equipped. The general in charge, B.G. Kaul, was a favorite of Krishna Menon. Menon had convinced Nehru over the years that the real enemy was Pakistan, not China. The Chinese troops had favorable terrain on their side of the border. They were extremely well trained, armed, and equipped. Their information about our weaknesses was up to date. Having achieved their objective, they withdrew and declared a unilateral ceasefire, sparing us further humiliation and damage. Not one non aligned nation supported us. It was President Kennedy who, preoccupied with the Cuban Missile Crisis, promised and delivered aid promptly. Pandit Nehru's letters to Kennedy are pathetic. B.K. Nehru, who was then ambassador to the US, reports in his memoirs that he left a sense of shame when he was delivering Pandit Nehru's messages to Kennedy. Thank you very much.